Okay, on this lesson, we're going to be adding and subtracting rational expressions. So instead of multiplying and dividing, we're going to be adding and subtracting. So remember, rational expression, we have a fraction. So in order to add or subtract fractions, you have to have an LCD, which is the least common denominator. So your first step is to factor the denominators and then find that LCD. Then you'll need to adjust each fraction in order to get the denominators the same, to only add or subtract the numerators. Now, with subtracting, there is a common mistake. It's right here. If subtracting, you have to remember to distribute the negative to the second numerator. Okay? And then we will combine our numerators, see if we can simplify any more. So first step is to factor the denominators. So I have sum on the first denominator is 3, product is 2. So that would be 2 and 1. Second denominator, I have difference of two perfect squares. That would be x plus 2, x minus 2. Now I'm going to find the LCD. So the LCD, you're always looking at your first denominator that's factored, and you will include the whole entire denominator from the first one. Now looking at the second denominator, notice I already have the x plus 2 in the LCD, so I don't need to bring it over, but I do not have an x minus 2, so I do need to include that in my LCD. So we want the denominators to match. So we want the denominators to be all three of those factors. So if you look at the first denominator, we have x plus 2, x plus 1, but we're missing x minus 2. So I need to multiply the first fraction by x minus 2. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. If you remember us going over this before, we don't ever want to multiply the denominators together because we're not combining the denominators at the end. So I'm going to leave it factored in my denominator. And I can, however, go ahead and multiply these two together. I have to use FOIL. That would be x squared minus x minus 2x. That's multiplying, so plus 2. Okay, looking at my second denominator, I have x plus 2. I have x minus 2, so I'm missing x plus 1. So I need to multiply the denominator as well as the numerator by the x plus 1. So I'm going to bring down my plus sign. I am not going to multiply those together in the denominator. It doesn't matter the order that you're writing these as long as they're the same sign. And then I'm going to go ahead and multiply these because I'm having to add the numerators at the end. So that would be x squared, and that would be plus x. Okay, so notice our denominators are the same. So we're going to keep the denominator the same because when you add and subtract fractions, you do not change your denominator. You only combine the numerators. So I'm going to combine the x squareds, which would make 2x squared. I'm going to combine the x's. That's going to be negative 3x plus 1x, which is a negative 2x. And then I have the plus 2. Now, at the end, you need to look and see if you can factor the numerator. So notice they have a 2 in common. All right, and then we need to check and see if we can go any further. Sum would be negative 1. Product would be 1. That's not possible. So that would be my final answer. So sometimes once you factor it, you can simplify it further. Sometimes you can't. Just make sure that the numerator is factored. Now we have to also consider the excluded values, which looking at the factored original denominators, I'll put it over here. X cannot equal negative 2, negative 1, negative 2 we already have, and then positive 2. So make sure you also look at your excluded values there. All right, let's try another addition one. So first step is to factor your denominators. We can't factor x plus 5, so we don't have to do anything with that. The second denominator, it's a trinomial, so sum is 8, product is 15. So that would be 3 and 5. So finding your LCD, we always bring the whole first denominator in factored form. We didn't have to factor it, so we're bringing over the x plus 5. The second denominator, notice we already have an x plus 5, so don't write it again in the LCD. We need to bring over the x plus 3. Okay, so that's the denominators that we want. Looking at the first denominator, notice we already have x plus 5. We are missing x plus 3. So I need to multiply the first fraction by x plus 3. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So again, the denominators you don't ever multiply together, but you have to on the numerators because you're having to add it with another numerator at the end. So I'm going to use FOIL, that's 2x squared minus x plus 6x minus 3. Okay, I'm bringing down my plus sign. Looking at your second denominator, we have an x plus 3 and an x plus 5. Notice that is my LCD, so I don't have to do anything to my second fraction to get that denominator to be the same as the first. So then I'm just rewriting my numerator there. And then to add fractions, we add the numerators and keep the denominators the same. So I have a 2x squared. I don't have another x squared. I have a negative x plus 6x, which would be 5x, plus 3x, which would be 8x. And then negative 3 and negative 4, which would make negative 7. Remember, at the end, you need to check to see if you can factor the numerator. It's a trinomial that does not have a GCF, so sum is 8, product is negative 14. Notice those are your factors of negative 14. None of them add to 8, so you cannot factor the numerator. Looking at your excluded values, look at your original denominators. So that would be negative 5, cause it to be 0. This one would be negative 3, and then that one would be also be negative 5. Okay, now let's take a look at the next column, which is the subtraction. So very similar. We have to have a common denominator. Okay, so first thing, see if we can factor the denominator. Notice this is all one term. So if it's one term, you would use factor tree to factor it, but we can't do anything with it. So our LCD, go ahead and bring it over there. And then notice we cannot factor x minus 2. So since I do not have x minus 2, I have to bring the whole thing over. Don't just put minus 2. So remember, if it's 2 or more terms, it has to look exactly the same to not carry it over to the LCD. All right, first fraction. I have 3x, but I don't have x minus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and use FOIL in the numerator. I'm not multiplying my denominators there, keeping it factored. Bringing down your minus sign, looking at the second denominator, I have the x minus 2, but I don't have the 3x. So that would be minus 15x over. Okay, so remember I said a common mistake with subtraction is just not distributing it to the second numerator. But notice there's not another term here. So it just makes this whole thing negative 15x. So combine your like terms. We have an x squared. That would make 2x minus 15x, which would be negative 13x. And then the minus 8. Rewriting your denominator. See if you can factor the numerator at the end. And that's not possible. So that would be my final answer. excluded values, looking at your numerator or your denominator, 3x. 0 would cause that to be 0. And then the next one would be positive 2. Because 3x equals 0, divide by 3, and you still get 0. So anytime it's one term, 0 is going to be what causes that to be 0. Okay, last one. So always factor your denominators first. Notice these two have an x in common. Next one, sum is 8, product is 12. So that would be 6 and 2. So LCD. First denominator, always bring it over for the LCD factored. Notice in the LCD I don't have an x plus 6, but I already have the x plus 2, so I don't need to carry it over. So first fraction, I have x plus 2. I do not have x plus 6. So my denominator, I'm not going to multiply these together because remember they don't change. I am, however, going to use FOIL on the numerators. Okay, so second fraction, I have x plus 6. I have x plus 2 in the denominator, but I'm missing an x. Bring down your subtraction sign. Okay, so I need to go ahead and distribute this. That becomes x squared, and that becomes minus 5x. Okay, so this is the part where I was talking about a common mistake. This subtraction sign here needs to be distributed to both of these. So that becomes negative x squared and then plus 5x. Now we're going to combine the numerators. So if you look, we have an x squared and then minus x squared, because remember we had to distribute that negative. So that those cancel out. And then we have 3x plus 6x, which would be 9x, plus 5x, which would make 14x. And then we have the plus 18. And then just rewriting your denominator. And then at the end, remember, just check, see if you can factor the numerator. We can. They have a 2 in common, so we'll take a 2 out. That leaves us with 7x plus 9. And then notice we don't have any common factors, so that would be our final answer. Now make sure that you're putting your excluded values. So looking at the denominators of the original, 0 would cause that to be 0. Negative 2 would cause that to be 0. Negative 6, and then negative 2 again, so we don't have to write it twice. So this is adding and subtracting rational expressions. If you have any questions, please let me know.